All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Manosphere Guilds, Rebuilding Tradition, Recreating Institutions, and the Living Spirit of Western Civilization, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Manosphere Guilds, a field guide for men who still notice reality. The Testosterone Testament, shattering the Lyotardian lie, mocking the queer chimera, and withdrawing the male sacrifice to reclaim the living spirit of Western civilization from the parasitic left. I stand before the smoking ruins of the West, not as a mourner, but as an architect. And I ask you, are you man enough to lay the first stone of the new cathedral? Or will you continue to worship the hollow idols of a degenerate age? Look around you. We live in a lunatic asylum run by the inmates, where the metric of morality is the humidity of a woman's tears, and the yardstick of truth is whatever the grand inquisitors of the Ministry of Truth deem current thing on social media today. The postmodern condition is just a fancy academic cloak for the spiritual syphilis of rejecting logos. It is the toddler screaming that there is no spoon because he doesn't want to eat his vegetables. We have watched the brutal cuckoldry of the scientific method by the screaming harpies of lived experience, a descent from the dialectic rigor of the Athenian agora to the hormonal incoherence of a teenage girl's diary. This is not civilization. This is the chaotic prelude to the fall, and if you possess even a shred of the Stoic virtue that built the roads you drive on, you are sick to death of being forced to walk on eggshells by a society that has forgotten the very definition of a man. You have been betrayed by the oldest trick in the book, the Munchausen state of weaponized vulnerability. You see it in the Amber Heard fiascos of the world, where a woman's crocodile tears are treated as forensic evidence, while a man's battered face is treated as an inconvenience to the narrative. They pretend to need help always endlessly expensively because victimhood is the new currency of the realm, minted by cultural Marxists to buy your submission. These are the same ideologues who preach the infinite, expanding vapor of the LGBTQ+ spectrum, a gender theory so logically bankrupt it refutes itself in the same breath. If gender is a spectrum with infinite points, then the definition of woman is nothing, meaning the definition of trans is also nothing, meaning the entire ideology is a semiotic fraud designed to sever your children from biological reality. It is an ontological war against natural law, a denial of the binary code of the universe itself, and it is being taught to your sons by state-appointed priests of nihilism. But the ultimate indignity, the final proof of the gynocentric conspiracy, is the deafening silence regarding the hecatomb of heroes, the systemic disposal of men. Warren Farrell laid out the cold, hard facts of male disposability, yet you are still expected to sign up for the draft, to work the 90-hour weeks, to die in the coal mines, and to pay the alimony, all while being spit on by the very institutions you sustain. I will show you, with the brutal clarity of the trivium, that feminism was never about equality. It was about maximizing female safety and resource extraction while minimizing female accountability. You are the beast of burden, and the whip is the woke moral panic. This essay is your honorable discharge papers from that plantation. We are going to take the red pill, analyze the evolutionary biology of female duplicity and leftist pathology, and rebuild the guilds of Western civilization on a foundation of unyielding rational truth. The Lyotardian lie, deconstructing the postmodern incredulity toward logos, output. Consider the etymological piracy at the core of our decay, postmodernism. It sounds sophisticated, does it not? A stately progression beyond the modern. But strip the academic gobbledygook away, and you find a spiritual rabies, a pathological rejection of the logos, the very reason that ordered the cosmos. Jean-Francois Lyotard, the high priest of this nonsense, defined the postmodern condition as incredulity toward meta-narratives. Translate that from the weasel tongue of the Parisian café to the plain speech of the Western man. It is the calculated destruction of truth. They do not reject the grand narrative because it is false. They reject it because it imposes standards they are too weak to meet. They despise the heroic path because they are unwilling to leave the comfort of the crib. This is not philosophy, it is a tantrum against reality, a cosmic hissy fit waged by the weak against the strong, utilizing the weapon of incredulity to sever your mind from the ancestral wisdom of natural law. Observe the mechanics of this deceit through the feminization of epistemology. Historically, the masculine mind seeks the dialectic, a clash of steel sharpening steel, to arrive at the logos. The feminine impulse, unchecked by patriarchal reason, defaults to the dialogue, a murky swamp where feelings supersede facts and consensus is manufactured through emotional blackmail. The postmodern rejection of the grand narrative of Western progress is merely a Trojan horse for the small narrative of female solipsism. By elevating lived experience above objective evidence, they replace the measuring rod of reality with the mood ring of the moment. This is why you see the same intersectional insanity in the corporate boardroom as you do in the divorce court. It is the prioritization of the hysterical over the historical, ensuring that no stable institution can survive the tidal wave of teenage angst. We see this played out in the pronoun lunacy, a case study in Lyotard's language games weaponized for tyranny. When a man in a wig demands you call him she, he is not asking for courtesy. He is demanding you participate in his delusion under penalty of law. This is the semantic seizure of power. By compelling your speech, they force you to abandon the grammar of reality, the first step of the trivium, and submit to their subjective chaos. It is a loyalty test to the cult of relativism. If they can make you utter a lie about the fundamental biological binary, they can make you swallow any poison they brew. It is the ultimate beta test for totalitarianism. If you will deny the evidence of your own eyes to appease a hysterical narcissist, you will bow to anything. Do not be fooled by the grammar bias framing these debates. The leftist trick is to present lived experience as the ultimate trump card against logic, a shield of victimhood that deflects all scrutiny. They frame their subjective grievance as objective fact, shouting my truth to drown out the truth. You must ruthlessly reject this frame. A feeling is not a fact, and a grievance is not an argument. When a feminist cites the wage gap or systemic oppression, she is not engaging in dialectic. She is issuing a demand for resources based on a rigged game of emotional poker. Expose this rhetorical sleight of hand. Point out that the only oppression in the West is the suffocating weight of their bureaucratic envy. The remedy lies in the very tools they seek to banish, the trivium and the transcendentals. We must wage a metaphysical counterattack, reasserting the good, the true, and the beautiful as the immutable pillars of civilization. Without these objective standards, we are merely animals rutting in the dark. Use the trivium, grammar to define terms, logic to test validity, and rhetoric to persuade the masses, to dismantle the jargon of cultural Marxism. The war is semantic before it is physical. When they say equity, hear theft. When they say inclusion, hear exclusion of the competent. Rearm your mind with the vocabulary of the builder and the warrior, leaving the weeping philosopher to starve in his void. Consider the syllogism of suicide, the logical silver bullet that kills the postmodern beast. Premise A: all claims to objective truth are oppressive constructs, the postmodern axiom. Premise B: the statement all claims to objective truth are oppressive constructs presents itself as an objective truth. Conclusion, therefore, by its own standard, the postmodern axiom is an oppressive construct and must be discarded. Their ideology is a snake eating its own tail, a paradox that collapses under the slightest pressure of reason. It is a death cult built on a logical error. The West is not a history of oppression. It is the only history that liberated the individual through reason, due process, and the mixed constitution. We must mock the incredulity of the left and replace their nihilism with the heroic narrative of the guildsmen. We built the cathedrals, they defecate in the vestibules. It is time to reclaim the narrative, to stand tall in the sunlight of the logos, and to drive the liars, the cry bullies, and the spiritual eunuchs back into the shadows from whence they came. To effectively drive these shadow dwellers back, however, we must surgically excise the primary mechanism of their parasitism, the corruption of male benevolence. The postmodern rejection of objective truth is merely the philosophical veneer for a much older biological warfare tactic, the weaponization of weakness. We must expose how the feminine imperative, acting through the Munchausen state, hacks the male protector instinct, turning our capacity for mercy into the very mechanism of our enslavement. The Munchausen state, weaponized vulnerability, and the parasitism of pity. Compassion is the vice of kings, wrote the poet, yet in our effeminate age, compassion has become the shackle of the slave. We must confront the insidious mechanics of the help trap, a snare set by the architects of the Munchausen state to exploit the biological nobility of the male spirit. When a modern woman or the leftist state she births cries out, "I can't do it," do not hear an admission of incapacity, hear a demand for your subjugation. The statement is a linguistic sleight of hand, a fractal of the feminine imperative. I want you to do it for me so I can retain the power while you bear the burden. This is the essence of weaponized incompetence. Your response must be a stoic monolith. Do it yourself or it doesn't get done. To yield is to accept a contract where you provide the labor and she collects the equity. Consider the evolutionary biology of the damsel, a creature not of fragility but of predatory cunning. The fainting trope of the Victorian era was not a medical condition but a strategic deployment of aggressive victimhood. Just as the chameleon changes its colors to evade detection, the gynocentric actor feigns helplessness to trigger the male protector instinct, a biological subroutine that the left has hacked and repurposed. This is the white knight trap, a siren song that lures rational men into drowning themselves in the quicksand of female solipsism. We see this pathology amplified in the public square, where the "we believe survivors" mantra has become a mask for "we hate due process." Observe the spectral differences in media coverage, the Duke Lacrosse case, or the Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp trial. In these instances, a woman's crocodile tears were treated as gospel, capable of obliterating careers and lives, while the silent grinding suffering of men was rendered invisible by the gamma bias of the press. The tearful accusation is now sufficient evidence for the destruction of the accused. Due process is sacrificed on the altar of hurt feelings. This brings us to the logical fallacy rotting the foundation of the West, which we shall dismantle with the sword of truth. Consider the syllogism of the week. Premise A: vulnerability confers moral authority in the gynocentric frame. Premise B: one can feign vulnerability with zero cost acting. Conclusion: moral authority is counterfeited by the immoral, dispossessing the actually virtuous. This is the parasitism of pity. The Munchausen state, much like the psychological disorder it is named after, induces a crisis to manufacture the dependency it needs to exist. By elevating sensitivity to a supreme virtue, the left has created a golem of political correctness that shuffles through our institutions, crushing dissent. If you hurt their feelings, you are a Nazi. If you point out the statistical realities of crime or the biological realities of sex, you are a heretic. This is the eggshell gate, the comical yet tragic spectacle of men walking on eggshells to avoid triggering the neurotic sensitivity of the modern hysteric. This is a shit test at the societal level, and we are failing it spectacularly. Yielding to this neurosis signals low status. It invites further abuse. It is the behavior of a butler in the face of a toddler's tantrum. The remedy from the Western canon is clear and absolute: Stoicism. The rational man does not modulate his speech to suit the delicate sensibilities of the perpetually aggrieved. He builds competence. He does not ask for help, nor does he offer pity, which is merely the inflation of the ego at the expense of the pitied. He offers justice. We must cut the funding to the drama queens of the state and the home. The living spirit of Western civilization is not built on the shifting sands of emotion, but on the bedrock of natural law. Refuse the parasitism of pity. Let the vulnerable face the consequences of their own incompetence, and watch how quickly the weakness evaporates into the cold, bracing air of reality. This is gamma bias baked into the institutional cake, the systematic distortion of objective reality to appease the subjective feelings of the perpetually aggrieved. The cultural Marxists captured the universities first, yes, but the conquest of the clinical psychology apparatus was the decisive blow, the seizing of the mental health high ground from which they could label sanity as pathology and pathology as liberation. I have seen the internal memos, tracked the advocacy groups lobbying the APA, and traced the grant money flowing from foundations dedicated to the dissolution of the traditional family. This reclassification was not a correction, it was a capitulation. The empirical method, the crown jewel of Western epistemology, was sacrificed on the altar of inclusivity, and in its place, they installed a neo-Gnostic heresy where the soul's fleeting whim outranks the body's biological truth. The chimera of the spectrum, queer theory's ontological war against natural law. Aristotle, the father of formal logic, established the law of non-contradiction. A thing cannot be and not be at the same time and in the same respect. Yet here we stand, 2 millennia later, watching the American Psychological Association attempt to repeal reality through committee vote. When the APA reclassified gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria in the DSM-5, they performed not a scientific correction, but a theological substitution. The father, the ordering principle, the phallus as symbol of differentiation and hierarchy, was executed in the abstract, replaced by the formless maternal void where nothing has a name and nothing has a nature. I watched this happen in real time, read the committee transcripts, traced the funding, followed the citations back to their activist origins. This was not the march of progress discovering new truths. This was the lawyer's trick of redefining terms to win an argument you cannot win with evidence. Consider the etymology. Dysphoria derives from the Greek dysphoros, meaning hard to bear. The APA admitted the distress is real, but severed it from any cause. Imagine if we treated anorexia this way, affirmed the patient's belief that they are obese, provided liposuction, attacked anyone who pointed out the skeletal frame in the mirror as a hateful bigot. We would call this malpractice, institutional capture, a conspiracy of lies. Yet when a man believes himself a woman, we are commanded to nod, to smile, to lie, to betray our own eyes and the testimony of every ancestor who ever lived. The APA's own data shows that 80 to 95% of children with gender dysphoria naturally desist if simply left alone through puberty. The treatment of affirmation causes the condition to persist. They manufacture the patients they claim to treat. This is the pharmaceutical industrial complex meets the ideological death cult. The humor writes itself, does it not? A 6'2" man in a dress, 5 o'clock shadow, visible through foundation, demands you call him ma'am or face professional destruction and potential criminal prosecution in certain jurisdictions. I have watched the videos, read the court cases, seen the contradictions pile up like bodies in a Jacobin cemetery. The progressive left, which spent decades telling us that gender is a social construct, a performance, a prison, suddenly discovers that gender identity is innate, immutable, sacred, the very soul of the person. Which is it? It cannot be both. They do not care. Consistency is a patriarchal value, you see. Logic is a tool of white supremacy. The categories of Aristotle, the laws of thought, the trivium itself, these are oppression in their theology. Here is a syllogism to cut through the fog. Premise A. Queer theory asserts that all categories, identities, and binaries are fluid social constructs with no basis in objective reality. Premise B. Queer theory asserts that queer and transgender are real, valid, and fixed identity categories, that must be recognized by society and law. Conclusion: queer theory refutes itself in its own premises as it demands we recognize as absolute truth the existence of categories whose existence it simultaneously denies. The snake eats its tail. The contradiction is not a bug, but a feature, a mental trap designed to break your capacity for rational thought. They want you confused, defeated, compliant. The biological bedrock remains regardless of feelings. Every cell in your body carries your sex in its chromosomes XX or XY. The DNA does not lie, does not care about your pronouns, cannot be cancelled by a Twitter mob or re-educated by a diversity consultant. The average man has 1,000 times more testosterone circulating in his blood than the average woman. Men have greater bone density, lung capacity, muscle mass, faster reaction times. Women have greater endurance, pain tolerance, immune function, longevity. These are not social constructs. They are the result of 200,000 years of evolutionary pressure written into the code of life itself by a process no committee can vote to revise. To deny this is not compassion, it is a lie, and lies enslave. Think about the apprenticeship system that shaped Western society. A youth joins a guild, yields to an expert, ascends through stages of competence and duty over many years. Learner, skilled worker, expert. Every level is authentic, deserved, provable. One cannot achieve master craftsman status by self-proclamation, by pressuring the guild to lower requirements, by claiming that differences between beginner and expert are merely social constructs meant to marginalize. Timber remains indifferent to emotions. Connections either succeed or break. Nature evaluates without pity. Obscuring clear categories dismantles the advancement structure entirely and eliminates quality, worthiness, accomplishment, the potential to transcend one's origins. I have seen the fear in men's eyes when these topics arise. They know the truth, but dare not speak it. They have watched what happens to dissenters, the fired, the deplatformed, the investigated, the dragged before human rights tribunals for the crime of stating that men are not women. In Canada, Bill C-16 made refusal to use preferred pronouns potential grounds for discrimination charges. In the UK, the police knock on doors for Twitter posts while girls are groomed by the thousands. The conspiracy of silence proves everything. If your ideology requires the threat of state violence to maintain itself, you have already admitted you cannot win through persuasion. The truth does not need a censorship regime. Only lies require such protection. The infinite spectrum is a logical impossibility that dissolves into nihilism. If gender exists on a spectrum with infinite possible points, then the categories man and woman cease to have meaning. If the categories have no meaning, then transgender, the movement from one category to another, becomes incoherent. You cannot transition from a point on a spectrum to another point if the spectrum itself denies that points exist as distinct locations. The ideology consumes itself. What remains is pure will to power, the demand that you submit to the delusion of the moment, that you acknowledge as reality whatever the screaming activist declares it to be today. Tomorrow brings a new truth. Yesterday's allies become today's heretics. This is not a political program. It is the ontological warfare of the chaos God against the ordering principle of civilization. The binary forms the bedrock of every concept, every tongue, every statute, 1 and 0, true and false, guilty and innocent, man and woman, father and mother, sun and moon, light and darkness, order and chaos. These dualities organize reality, enable cognition, and provide the classifications necessary for navigating life. The assault on the binary amounts to an assault on meaning, a strike against the logos that generates order from nothingness. Their goal is not to broaden classifications. They seek to incinerate the whole framework of Western thinking and revel in the remains. I say let them cavort in solitude. The rational observer sees the emperor naked, mocks the absurdity, and refuses to participate in the collective delusion. The initial stride toward liberty consists of speaking facts when all others speak falsehoods. That deafening roar is the sound of the parasite screaming for its dinner, terrified that the host might finally roll over and crush it. We must not answer this cacophony with the whining of the whipped dog, but with the silent, terrifying logic of the syllogism. The left has constructed a titanic mythology to shame us into the freezing water, while they commandeer the lifeboats, but the red-pilled man sees through the sophistry. Premise A. Civilization is built on male labor and male sacrifice. Premise B. The current regime extracts this labor and sacrifice while demonizing masculinity. Conclusion. Men must go on strike, go galt, until the regime collapses or respects the terms of the contract. This is the syllogism of the strike, the metaphysical refusal to be the sperm in the cannon for a culture that hates our guts while eating our lunch. The hecatomb of heroes, disposability, conscription, and the guild's rejection of the sacrificial altar. Women and children first. It is the phrase that utters itself in the crunch of splintering wood and the screaming of steam, the supposed golden rule of a chivalry long dead and weaponized against us. Consider the HMS Birkenhead in 1852, where British soldiers stood at attention on the deck of a sinking ship, damning themselves to the crushing dark of the Atlantic so that the women and children in the lifeboats might survive. That is the hecatomb, the great sacrifice of heroes upon the altar of biological necessity. We honor these men as paragons of virtue, yet we must brutally ask, where is the virtue in a one-sided contract? Today, the feminist harridans and their cultural Marxist puppeteers screech for equality in the boardroom, demanding half the CEO positions while refusing half the sewage maintenance shifts or half the body bags in the trenches. They invoke the Titanic fallacy, clamoring for the privileges of the aristocracy of sex while denouncing the responsibilities of the peasantry. They want the lifeboat without the sinking ship. They want the vote without the draft. This is not equality. It is a parasitic grift, a gamma bias that renders male suffering invisible, while amplifying female grievance to a deafening roar. This brings us to the irrefutable logic of the strike. Let us apply the trivium to the state of the Western male. Premise A. Civilization is a construction of male labor and defended by male blood. The roads, the sewers, the electrical grids, and the borders exist because men built and died for them. Premise B. The current gynocentric regime extracts this labor and blood via taxation and conscription while simultaneously demonizing masculinity as toxic and stripping men of their rights in family courts. Conclusion. The contract is void. We are dealing with a distinct logical fallacy in the leftist narrative. They assert that men are oppressors, yet the empirical reality, 90% of workplace deaths, 97% of combat deaths, and the entirety of the selective service registry proves that men are the supreme altruists, the sacrificial livestock of the species. To continue feeding a beast that bites the hand and curses the feeder is not virtue, it is stupidity. We must deploy the syllogism of the strike. If the system demands the sacrifice of the lamb but refuses to protect the flock, the lamb must refuse the altar. The evolutionary root of this pathology is the biological bottleneck. Schopenhauer understood the cruel arithmetic of nature. One man can impregnate a multitude of women, but a woman's womb is a scarce resource. Therefore, from the cold and moral perspective of the species, the male is disposable, sperm is cheap, eggs are expensive. Nature cares only for the continuation of the gene pool, not the happiness of the individual man. We are evolved to be the sperm in the cannon, fodder for the evolutionary war. However, the glory of Western civilization was its transcendence of this biological determinism through the concepts of natural law and justice. We built a society where a man's life was not merely a resource to be harvested, but a sacred end in itself. The left, in its infinite malice, seeks to drag us back into the primitive swamp, re-enshrining male disposability while stripping away the patriarchal protections that made that sacrifice honorable. They celebrate the abortion of millions and the divorce theft of fathers, treating the male contributor as a mere ATM and a genetic donor to be discarded. Look at the receipts. Review the wreckage of the family court system, where the tender years doctrine, a feminist invention of the 19th century, ensures that fathers are stripped of their children, reduced to weekend visitors and paychecks. In the United States, fathers are awarded primary custody in less than 20% of cases, despite overwhelming evidence that fatherless homes are the primary engine of criminality and social decay. The state acts as the enforcer of this gynocentric theft, taxing the labor of men to fund the welfare state that replaces the father. This is the leftist betrayal. They view the soldier as a baby killer and the working man as a deplorable cis-het oppressor. Yet they demand his taxes to fund their gender studies programs and his blood to fight their foreign wars. They are the vampires of the spirit, draining the vitality of the West to fuel their dystopian, androgynous nightmare. The remedy is the Guild. We must embrace the principle of subsidiarity, the notion that social issues should be dealt with at the most immediate, local level, and withdraw our consent from the Leviathan. The Manosphere Guild is not a social club. It is a counterstate, a civil society association based on the ancient mastery ladder of apprentice to journeyman to master. It is a rejection of the sacrificial altar. We build our own institutions, our own economies, and our own brotherhoods, rigorously excluding the poisonous ideologies of feminism and Marxism. We look to the mystery of male fraternity, the living spirit that built the cathedrals and defended the gates. We refuse to be the hecatomb. Let the system collapse under the weight of its own insanity. We will not be the fuel that keeps the lights on for those who hate us. You have walked through the fire of truth and survived. You now see the postmodern lie for what it is, a suicidal syllogism that devours itself, a screeching harpy of incredulity that cannot bear the weight of the logos. We have dissected the Munchausen machinations of the professional victim, exposed the queer chimeras waging war on biological bedrock, and finally stood atop the hecatomb of our disposable brothers to declare that the sacrificial altar is closed for business. You hold in your mind the sword of dialectic. You possess the shield of the trivium. You are immune to the sob story, allergic to the guilt trip, and resistant to the mind virus of cultural Marxism. They wanted you walking on eggshells. You have instead donned the boots of the guildsmen and crushed the fragile glass of their Gnostic delusions beneath your heel. The gamma bias of the media, the gynocentrism of the courts, the synthetic outrage of the blue-haired proletariat. These are not monolithic threats. They are pathetic paper tigers that dissolve instantly under the spotlight of natural law. You are no longer a pawn in their rigged game of ressentiment. You are a sovereign agent of the Western spirit, a guardian of the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful, reclaiming your birthright from the clutches of a decadent, feminized nihilism. The Guild calls for no master but virtue and no servant but reason. The state, that bloated leviathan of subsidiarity denying weakness, demands your blood for its wars and your sweat for its welfare, offering only scorn in return. The feminist harridan demands your submission while crying oppression, a contradiction so vile it would make the Furies blush. We reject it. We reject the conscription of our bodies and the conscription of our minds. The Manosphere is not a hole of despair. It is a fortress of apprenticeship, a citadel where the living spirit of our ancestors, the stonemasons, the philosophers, the kings, whispers the secrets of mastery back into our ears. We have slain the blue-pilled dragon of ignorance. You know now that the spectrum is a void, that vulnerability is a weapon of the wicked, and that objective truth is the only antidote to the chaos of the infinite. You are the antidote. You are the antibody in the bloodstream of a sick civilization. Do not be ashamed of your strength. Wield it. Do not apologize for your gaze. Sharpen it. Go forth, spread the gospel of the Guild, and let the hysterical screams of the postmodern witches fade into the silence of history. You are free. Logos has won. And now, the sponsored book introduction, Manosphere Guilds, Rebuilding Tradition, Recreating Institutions, and the Living Spirit of Western Civilization. You stand upon the precipice of the greatest cognitive dissonance in human history, staring into a void where logic once lived. The world you inherited has been meticulously dismantled by a cabal of emotionalists and cultural Marxists, replacing the bedrock of Western civilization with a shifting swamp of feelings and enforced mediocrity. I have walked through this wasteland, observing the systematic castration of the male spirit in the halls of academia, where grammar is abandoned for grievance studies, and in the corporate cubicles where meritocracy is murdered by the HR diversity priestesses. My own awakening came not through a gentle nudge, but through the violent collision of reality with the gynocentric fairy tales sold to us from birth. I watched as competent men were stripped of their sovereignty, their resources seized by a court system that views fatherhood as a revenue stream and masculinity as a pathology. This book is the result of that confrontation, a forensic autopsy of a dying society and the manual for its resurrection. Consider the irrefutable syllogism regarding the modern marital contract. If a contract is designed to be broken by one party without penalty, and that party is financially rewarded for the dissolution, then the contract is not a partnership but a trap. Data confirms this. With Gen Z marriage rates plummeting to 30%, young men are instinctively recognizing the uninsurable nature of matrimony in a no-fault jurisdiction. We are living under a regime of liability transfer where your productivity is harvested to subsidize the very ideologies that seek your destruction. To ignore this empirical reality is not virtuous, it is suicidal. The legal system has been weaponized to enforce financial castration, turning family courts into extraction centers that loot the accumulated capital of men to fund a matriarchal welfare state. This text is intended solely for the man who feels the crushing weight of this falsehood, the native son of the Anglosphere who realizes his history has been stolen and his virtues pathologized. You are the net taxpayer, the minority upon whom the entire edifice rests, yet you are demonized by the very institutions you sustain. If you are desperate for the stoic resilience of your ancestors and tired of apologizing for your testosterone, these pages are your armory. We will reclaim the lost tools of Aristotelian logic and Thomistic argumentation to dismantle the postmodernist linguistic traps embedded in your daily life. We will expose the abortion catastrophe not merely as a moral failing, but as a symptom of a culture that has severed itself from the natural order and the sanctity of life itself. Resulting in a billion lives extinguished in the name of convenience, prepare for a surgical dismantling of the war on manhood that extends from the classroom to the boardroom. We will analyze the corporate castration enacted by DEI mandates that prioritize skin color and gender over competence, destroying efficiency and innovation in the process. The solution is not to beg for a seat at a table that was built to exploit you, but to flip the table entirely. I present the architecture for parallel institutions, utilizing Bitcoin for financial sovereignty, the gig economy for labor independence, and independent media to break the stranglehold of the narrative controllers. This is the rational exit, a strategic disengagement from a system that cannot be reformed because it is functioning exactly as the gynocentric architects intended to geld you and harvest your labor until there is nothing left. However, if you are a creature of the progressive left, a believer in the equity cult, or a simp desperately clutching your white knighthood, hoping for a pat on the head, stop reading immediately. Put this book down and return to your safe spaces, your participation trophies, and your delusions. The logic contained herein will shatter your fragile worldview, and you lack the philosophical fortitude to withstand the barrage of truth bombs. You will find no comfort here, no validation for your victimhood, and no sanctuary for your emotional reasoning. Go back to your distractions, and let the men who built civilization discuss how to save it from the ruin you have wrought. For those who remain, understand that this is not merely a critique, it is a blueprint for a masculine renaissance. By integrating the red pill truths of Schopenhauer with the strategic foresight of modern economics, we lay the groundwork for a new Western civilization. We will tie votes to contributions, ensuring that those who bleed for the state are the ones who steer it, stripping the franchise from the parasitic classes who vote themselves bread and circuses. This is the path to restoration, a return to a society that values logos over pathos and strength over weakness. The 1,000-year golden age awaits those brave enough to seize their agency and build anew from the ashes of the gynocentric lie. Manosphere Guilds, rebuilding tradition, recreating institutions, and the living spirit of Western civilization, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.